Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the People Overview and Scrutiny. It's Tuesday, the 19th of November. It's just gone 7 o'clock, and so I would like to start this meeting. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded for publication on the Council's website, and I hope it is. So we'll move on to our first item, which are apologies for absence. We've had apologies received for Councillor Rigby and for our representative Nicola Cranch. I'm pretty certain that Councillor Hooper, who was hoping to attend, who's the portfolio holder for adult services, he's for wellbeing and loads of things. Unfortunately, due to an emergency commitment, he's unable. It is likely to be with us. So apologies for him, even though he's not a member of the committee as such. Any other apologies from anyone?
No further apologies.
Right. And my apologies. I think if you look in the minutes, you'll see that I got it wrong. I missed somebody out last time. So if I have missed you off, speak now or forever hold your peace. Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. We now move on to item 2, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. Again, it's outlined in the agenda. The comprehensive minutes are there. Hopefully I know there are people here. Does anybody wish to make an amendment? Yes, Councillor Johnston.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not sure if it's an amendment, but on page 11, on the Q1 forecast, the last one paragraph, it was brought up about the overestimation on the COVID money, basically. I thought we were told we were going to get a breakdown of how that came out. I thought that's what I asked for. If I didn't, I'm sorry. I'm asking for it now, please.
I share your concern about that, and I too have recollections of that. And indeed, I will be raising Q2, albeit briefly, under urgent business. So it may give, we haven't actually got any representatives of finance here, and it'll probably fall to Rob and Sheila to maybe try and hold the fort. But what I would say, Barry, if you're happy for us to skip over that, I'll go back and listen to the meeting with colleagues, and if it needs amending and it hasn't been done, A, we'll get the figures out, and B, it will be noted in the minutes. Is that okay with yourself?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Any other changes to minutes or whatever? In which case, we will move on. Thank you very much indeed. I'll sign that in a minute. Right, speaking of matters of urgent business, I've got a couple of things that I wish to bring to the meeting, which relate to urgent business. The first one, hopefully we can go over it, but I think go over it very quickly. I believe it's the duty of this scrutiny committee to look at a wide range of issues that concern the health, well-being and education of people in this borough. And sometimes they may be a fairly tenuous link to the council and to this committee. But I really do feel that our job is to cast a very wide eye and to ask some questions. And as a ward councillor in Stamford-le-Hope, I've been getting quite a lot of questions about what's happening at our 2 secondary schools in the east of the borough, Hassenbrook and Gable Hall, which were due to be taken over by the Mosbourne Federation. And if members remember, a couple of meetings ago, I did raise the question and asked if there were any pending concerns because Mosbourne were due to take over in November. Originally, it had been September. And I thought, right, all well and good, it should all go through. My understanding is parents have been told, I don't think there's been any official statements. Parents have been told that the transfer is still not in play, and the O2 are currently technically the people controlling the school, although operationally I understand it's all Mosbourne processes. That just worries me because it shouldn't be that way. It should be open and honest and transparent, and it should be. It's not about just sending messages to the parents of the year groups that are there at the moment. There are parents who will be looking about their children going up, or children who are probably in year 6, maybe even in year 5. They'll be looking at what their plans are. Do we move house? How do we do this, that and the other? And we're getting complete silence out of these two to secondary schools, and it also involves Corringham Primary. I have written to Mosbourne, I've written to O2 personally, asking for some information and an update. I have been completely blanked. So I'll raise that as a matter of concern, and I'll take the liberty of asking Sheila Murphy, our Director of Children's Services, including Education, if you have any information you could share with us, or equally if you have any concerns.
Yeah, I think most members will know that this is an academy trust, and so the rebrokering is being organised through the Department for Education with the regional school director. So I've got information from the regional schools director which I can read out. So what they're saying is Mosbourne Federation is currently working closely with 3 or 2 academies. The delay to the formal transfer date has been due to the time it has taken to conclude an external financial audit of the O2 accounts and then to finalise the new funding agreement, which the trust must enter into as part of the transfer process. So the previous CEO of O2 left at the end of last term, and to bridge that gap, the O2 Federation Board appointed the current CEO of Mosbourne as the interim CEO of the O2 Federation on the 27th of August. So effectively, Mosbourne are actually in control of those schools currently. Mosbourne has also brought in additional senior leadership capacity from within their trust to work across the O2 academies in order to deliver the much needed school improvement support, particularly at Hassenbrook and Gable Hall. So Mosbourne has invested significant resources into this transfer and remain committed to conclude the final formal transfer for the 1st of January 2025. So in terms of the running of the school at the moment, Mosbourne have and are very involved on a day-to-day basis and have got some of their senior leadership team in there operationally. Obviously, this has taken longer than any of us would have wanted in terms of a formal handover, and at this point in time, you know, I can only sort of trust what the regional schools office are telling us. They're aware that I'm going to share this with Overview and Scrutiny tonight.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you for making the effort to get that information. I'm glad somebody's speaking. I mean, we'll move on, but if there are any parents or anybody who read about this meeting this evening or watch the film and have any concerns, you know, we have got academisation. It is something of very much of an arm's length operation for this organisation. But as you've so eruditely just shown, we do have access and weight with the Department for Education, where some of the blame for this will lie, without a shadow of a doubt, because they prevaricated through various contenders to go and take over that school, and indeed went against local wishes and local recommendations. You know, there were numbers, well, Gateway Learning Academy community were one who were in the frame and actually spent a long time in the school. But we'll move on. Thank you for that. But I do believe it's our responsibility to look at everything that goes on in our borough, even if it's not something that we can directly control. And speaking of something that we can not necessarily directly control, but which we can have a significant influx on, some members may have seen stories in the media recently relating from a report made to the Health and Wellbeing Board of this council, which raised significant concerns via Thurrock Health Watch regarding discharge from our 3 regional hospitals, not just Basildon itself. We're very lucky because a member of this committee is Kim James from Health Watch, and I've asked her to touch on this subject and give us an update of where we are, and she's very kindly agreed to. Again, it's not in our direct remit, but the fact that we're seeing people discharged when they shouldn't be discharged is extremely worrying.
Thank you, Chair. Since we carried out that work, which took quite some time, a lot longer than we planned, but it just kept coming in, and it was staff as well as patients, we did get some really good examples of how it could work, but it doesn't work for everybody. The plan was that rather than make all the recommendations we would normally make, it was quite obvious that right throughout the report, this was around communication. communication for people coming out of hospital to the people that should be caring for them. Community nurses should be going into them and they weren't. There was lots of stuff going on, and we just kept finding more and more and more. And the staff, some of the staff in that pathway of discharge within the hospital and out in the community raised their concerns, that they had very serious concerns themselves about some of the patients that were falling through a gap and how safe they were. That report was accepted by mostly everybody. Everybody could see that that's what was in there was actual factual. It's people's lived experience and staff. So what we recommended was that could we bring a group of people together that are in that pathway and then go through some of the cases, not to blame anyone, not to point a finger, but to see where these squeeze points are, where it's failing. So the people in the room could go, well, that's the point it went wrong for that person and that was the plan. Unfortunately, it would appear that is not going to happen. There's been some objection that I don't think that's a really good idea, and this isn't the hospitals, I have to say. Michelle Stapleton is absolutely banging on the door saying, let's do this. I now appreciate we've now hit winter pressures, which means that most of those people need to be doing the jobs, not sitting in a room. But I was disappointed that the response I got from the ICB was that they have, it's the TOC, the Transfer of Care Hub, that they've put a questionnaire in place to pick up any concerns. It's online only and it's 34 questions. And I really don't think that they are going to pick up the issues that we are finding on the day of people being discharged and really nobody knows they're home yet because the message hasn't reached the right people. So we are disappointed with that. We really expected more help and response. We are going to, although we've been told that we're now not commissioned to do that piece of work, we are carrying on with it. And I want to reassure everybody that we are absolutely staying with this piece of work. It is a priority. And we will keep chasing, and we will keep making sure that those people are picked up. A lot of this is being picked up by another project that's run within CEVS that I oversee, which is your By Your Side Home from Hospital. They get the discharge list in the mornings and they make welfare calls to these people to make sure they're home, if they've got everything they need, do they need any shopping, is everybody that's there should be there. We've approached our commissioners recently over it and they have actually given us more money. It's a very small project, very small, it's £70,000, which sounds a lot, but it's not when you think they're picking up every discharged patient into Thurrock. And we've now increased the service to 7 days, 8 to 8, because they will pick up the phone the minute they find anyone, to Thurrock first or whoever, to get helping for those people straight away. And I really don't think a questionnaire of 34 pages is going to help 86-year-old people who have been left sitting in a chair waiting for an agency to come who didn't turn up. They're not going to answer that questionnaire. It will be the fit and well, you know, that are able to do that. But the hospital have now agreed. We've now got in place that every single patient in Thurrock that's discharged, we get on that list. So we prioritise those that obviously look at elderly or frail to make sure they've got somebody at home, that they've got help. And we work our way down to hip replacements and shoulder surgery and new mums. And even those, some of them they've had some issues when they've got home. So I just wanted to really reassure everyone that we are still on this. We're not going to not do it. We are going to keep reporting it and we are going to keep picking up on any issues that we have, because I just feel that something has to happen, otherwise it's not going to be good during winter.
Thank you. Although this is items of business, and we do have colleagues from the health services, it would be unfair to put them on the spotlight at short notice, because I don't believe we should ever do that, unless it was really, really, really urgent. But if any members, I mean, we're very lucky with Health Watch, and I'm not just blowing sugar at Kim, that they do a tremendous job. And the passion and commitment from all members of that team is genuinely, I believe, outstanding. They're local people, by and large, who live here and play here and have their families here, and so maybe that is a great motivational force for why they're so keen. Kim, I know, is very knowledgeable about this. If any members would have any questions of Kim, anything specific, if not, we can move on, and I'm just going to make a slight suggestion. No questions? Everybody happy? Sorry, yes, John. Councillor.
Has the role of the staff nurse in the ward where the patient was before they were discharged been changed? Because I've seen very, very strong ward sisters who'd not let anybody out unless there was care that she was satisfied with. So has the role of the ward sister or the ward manager changed?
Eagle-eyed Kim will answer.
I think that throughout this, we have maintained and keep saying that we truthfully believe that nobody gets up in the morning with the intention of causing anybody harm. Everybody is under pressure. The hospitals are under pressure, the staff are under pressure. The hospital is going into crisis at the moment with their, black alerts, with so many people coming in, people in ambulances, and a push to empty beds. And the fact that they're now having to discharge people as medically optimised rather than medically fit, some of those people are slipping through. And, I really, really think that we all do it, where you pick the phone up with every intention of contacting someone to alert them that this person's coming home, that that person isn't contactable, and then you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and think, oh, I know what I didn't do. I really don't believe that they're intentionally discharging people unsafely. I truthfully believe it is the system, that everybody is under pressure. But it's our job to make sure those people at the end of that pressure are safe.
Thank you, Kim, and absolutely, I'm sure all members would pay tribute to the vast majority of people working within the NHS, sometimes in almost intolerable circumstances, and as you quite rightly say, nobody goes to work on the shop floor at a hospital or a clinic or wherever intending to do anything other than their very best. So we will move on, but what I'm going to suggest we do is we put it on our work programme for observation. It's a work in progress at the moment, the improvement plan. So great that has been recognised. There are problems. Great that you're engaging with the NHS services. And yes, there are mistakes on both sides, I'm sure. So we'll just keep a watching brief through your good officers, if that's okay, and we'll add it to the work programme so we've got it there recorded for us, if you're happy for that.
Yes,
Thank you,
Chair.
Okay. Oh, sorry, yes.
Hi, thank you, Chair. It's a comment, really, statement, I suppose, from looking back at when I used to be on ICP and ICB, and they were writing the strategy, and Jeff Banks was utterly committed to getting that improvement of community engagement, and did a whole piece and an exercise where members like yourself and I were in the room. There was a rabbit in the centre of the room, a toy rabbit. If you agreed with the statement, you stayed close to the rabbit. If you didn't, you moved away from the rabbit. And they asked about, are we good at community engagement? And everybody was against the wall, and I went outside the door, because there's a huge amount to do. And I'm really surprised that 2 years later, they're still not engaging with the very people that can supply them with the data that they need. So I just wonder if there's a piece of work or a letter or something from yourself as chair to ICB to come along to maybe try to see how they can improve that.
That invitation can go out. That's, as I say, we'll put it on the work schedule and invite him to come and speak. And as I say, liaise with Kim. So thank you for that input. Moving on through matters that are not necessarily urgent business in that respect, but as you're all aware, we have a task and finish group that's been working incredibly hard and doing a lot of good stuff to look at dealing with the problems of childhood obesity. And Liz has chaired that committee with absolute vigour. Unfortunately, isn't with us this afternoon, but has liaised with Councillor Fish just to give us a very brief update on where the group is at the moment. There will be a full report coming up on the outcome of that work group in the near future.
Thanks, Chair. The Task and Finish Childhood Obesity Group started our work in September. The purpose being to discover more about the causes of childhood obesity, what are the main factors that contribute to it, and find recommendations to improve the situation. We've met with stakeholders, young people and community services, and the draft report's now being written, and we are meeting in early December before the report goes to the senior leadership team for approval. The final report will be presented to the People Overview and Scrutiny Committee in January, and our thanks go to officers and all who have given their time to help us.
Thank you, Councillor Fish. Okay, and quickly running through I'm trying to get as quick as I can, run through my list of things that I think need bringing to the committee's attention. I'm just going to touch on an item that has been raised by two fellow councillors and two businesses within Thurrock with us in the last 24 hours. And I've had some significant discussion, well, not significant, some detailed discussion with Sheila Murphy. It relates to nursery fees and delays in payments of nursery fees. And it may well be an administrative problem, but we've got some very unhappy people. And the downside of it may be that parents of children who are getting preschool care maybe end up being invoiced, which I'm sure they wouldn't want at this time of the year. I don't think there's any question at all of any money going missing. I just think there are administrative problems. And I suspect that somewhere within Thurrock Council system, and I suspect somewhere within the nursery providers systems, things have not been joined up as well as they would be. But from communications that I have seen, I think the council has got an issue it needs to look into. So for those people who've asked, the councillors and the groups that have asked me to look into this and raise it this evening, it has been raised. It will now be minuted, and I will ask again whether we get a report to our next meeting or whether we leave the people involved to sort it out between themselves. But it goes back to what I'm saying. This committee's role is to look at all things and be there as a watchdog for the people of Thurrock and a watchdog for some of the health providers in Thurrock if they're getting the wrong end of the stick. So I don't need to say any more on that. I don't need to ask Sheila to speak, but it is logged. And I come to my last item, which goes back to what Councillor Johnson was talking about earlier on in terms of something that may or may not be missing from the minutes. But one thing that we do have to keep an eye on this committee are the finances of our children's and our adult social care departments. And I did ask in the preamble meetings before this evening, the second quarter forecast is more or less complete. I think it's due to be presented to Cabinet shortly. We tend to get it after the Lord Mayor's show when it's all done. I genuinely believe the role of this committee is to be ahead of the game, because at the end of the day, it's okay if we're doing well. It's not really a problem. But if something's going wrong and we're leaking money and hemorrhaging, it's better to turn the spotlight on it early rather than later. So in turn, I'd like to ask Rob if he would just give us an update on adult social care finances and Sheila on children's services. Doesn't have to be any great detail, and I actually believe there may be a little bit of good news.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, the position at the last scrutiny committee was we reported that the adult social care budget was underspent by £1.2 million on the year. As the Chair states, the quarter two projections are not out until next month, but I can report that the adult social care position is looking slightly improved on that position from the last time we reported it. So there's been a slight improvement in that position by a relatively modest amount, but around £100,000 improvement.
Yeah, I think last time we reported £1 million overspend, and that overspend has reduced to 500k.
That is the sort of news that we like to hear. Well done, all people, in getting that. And as I say, we don't need to go any further on that matter, but it is, I believe, relevant that we just keep checking in. So in which case we can move to the next item on the agenda, and this, again, is going to be good news. It's the outcome of the Ofsted inspection. Was touched on at full council, but very appropriate that it also comes to this meeting. So, Sheila, would you like to give us a briefing?
Yeah, I'm going to take it that you've all had a chance to have a read of the covering report and hopefully of the actual Ofsted report as well. It's not overly long, but it is a bit joyous to read. So I think it's great when we get some good news, and the first bit just explains what the ILACs are, which is the local authority children's inspection framework. It's been in place since 2018. Our last full ILACs inspection was in November 2019, and we were graded then good across the board, having previously been requires improvement across the board in the previous inspection to that one. So we've had our most recent inspection, which took place between the 9th and the 20th of September 2024. It is a very detailed and robust review of all areas of practice in children's social care. And they spend, the inspectors, we had 5 inspectors and then 2 additional ones who were looking particularly at education and looking at adoption and fostering separately. They've spent a lot of time directly with our social workers. We produced lots of documents. They met with children, young people, families direct as well. So it was a very thorough and forensic, actually, approach to the work that we do. There are 4 outcomes that we're judged on, which is impact of leaders on social work practice of children and families, the experience and progress of children who need help and protection, the experience and progress of children in care, the experiences and progress of care leavers. This has become a standalone judgment since January 2023, rightly. These are very vulnerable young people that we still retain corporate parenting responsibility for. And then we get an overall effectiveness judgment. So if I sort of skip through a lot of the rest of it, I mean, basically we got an outstanding against all 4 judgments, which then leads to an overall outstanding judgment itself. There were no actions, which is actually incredibly rare to have an inspection report from Ofsted that doesn't give you at least one action or something. And we all had our pens ready when they were giving feedback, and we actually said to the inspectors when they finished, we said, what about the actions? And they said, no, we're not giving you any. To get an outstanding across all 4 judgments is fairly rare as well. Over the last 5 years, we are the 6th council to get that judgment. Other councils have got outstanding, but they might have got a good judgment against one of the 4 judgments, but you can still get an overall outstanding. But to get outstanding against all 4 judgments, we were the 6th council in the last 5 years to get that. We're not at all complacent, because this doesn't mean that everything's fantastic and it's all wonderful. It does mean it's excellent services, but we are always wanting to improve and to continue to do things differently, better. I think yesterday the government published a paper about children's social care, and again, new things that are going to be coming our way in the next few years. So we'll be looking at those and looking at how we introduce those into our practice. That's probably enough from me.
Thank you. We've got a little bit ahead of the game, and I'll open to the floor to a minute, but I think it might just be appropriate, and again, I know it was said at a full council, but Councillor Hartstein, I know, has been, closely watching things that have been going on, and I know took, I believe, a great deal of pride, and deservedly so, in whatever, and I just wonder whether you'd want to comment to this meeting?
Yep, certainly. Thank you, Chair. It's just obviously to reiterate what Sheila has said. Obviously, I'm extremely proud of the overall result, and it's particularly outstanding. It's particularly outstanding considering the fact that we're in intervention. So, I really do think that we have a Thurrock Children's Services to be proud of. So I just wanted to say thank you once again. As I say, I did bring forward a full motion at full council the other week, but just to reiterate again publicly to say thank you and congratulations to the whole of Children's Services. Thank you.
Thank you. I will then ask if anybody has any questions, but I will preface that by, as I did mention it at full council myself, and I made a grave omission that I didn't congratulate Councillor Johnson on his contribution in the years before the current administration took place, and it was a faux pas on my part. But I know he played a part in turning this ship around. So are there any questions from the floor of the meeting or any comments? Councillor Arnold.
Thank you, because I missed that full council. I just wanted to say that you and Janet are a formidable team, as is your team below you. And so I kind of wouldn't expect anything less from you, because I think you'd be gutted. But I think you do an amazing job, all of you, the whole team, having sat in on various sections of the service, been to the Foster Carers Awards, the Children in Care Awards, how your team engage and MASH, and some of the horrendous stories of abuse and neglect, and how you've turned those children around. It's just utterly amazing. So well done.
Councillor Fish.
Just to say congratulations as Chair of Governors at a school which has been graded by Ofsted outstanding on 4 consecutive occasions. I know what it takes to be outstanding, and I know how much work goes into that continuously every day. Attention to detail and just full commitment. But as you said, now you've been graded outstanding, you want to try and keep that up. That doesn't mean standing still and keeping where you are. It means improving again. That's what we've had to do every time that we've been graded outstanding. So good luck for the future as well.
Thank you, Councillor Fish. Just one, as I say, to reiterate all those congratulations. One thing I should say, because I've been involved in a couple of conversations, and a huge amount of tribute has been paid to, and deservedly so, to our social services element. And I know the actual areas that we were judged is really social services driven rather than education. But just you know, I mean, I had a little bit of a pop, if you like, at education a little while ago. But again, I'm sure that there are many members of the team, and I know, because Sheila and I spoke some weeks before we got a nod, but not the official outcome. And I was wearing my other hat in my professional life. I got a letter from a parent who was homeschooling a child, and actually wrote a really effusive letter to the media. I mean, not moaning about something, actually saying what a great member of staff they'd come out from Thurrock Council and helped their child and helped them, and had done really well. So the Children's Services is the sum of all its parts, many multifaceted, and as I say, huge praise to each and every one of them in there. Okay, well, we're doing okay for time, thankfully, despite my huge list of urgent business. So we move on to the next item, which is, sorry, yeah, we do have to do, I keep forgetting our recommendations. This is where my good friends keep me in order. So where am I finding my recommendations today? It'll be on the agenda at the beginning. Page which one? This is inspection. Yep, I've got it there. Recommendation 1.1, that the committee note Thurrock's outcome from the Ofsted ILACs and offer their unanimous thanks to all officers and elected members of the council involved in achieving the outstanding rating. I'm sure we all support that recommendation. Unanimously carried. We move on to the next item, which is a report on estates, reviews and proposals relating to the health assets in the borough. And I would ask Mike Thompson, thank you for the patience of sitting with us through the previous items, but to deliver your report, please.
Thank you. Before I take anything on the detail of the report, Tom and Rob, we're going to do some introductions just to set the strategic context for it. So if I could just ask Rob and then Tom just to say a few words, and then I'll take, with your agreement, Chair.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, if I could just take the paper as read, But this is, as Mike says, an NHS paper. Mike and Tom are here to present and take questions. But we are a system partner. We work in partnership with the NHS around these issues. And so I felt it appropriate for me, still being relatively new, if I just gave a little bit of a couple of my observations of the key issues that I've been presented with in my first 5 weeks here. So a number of issues have really come to light since that have been presented to me. So, and these are all known to you. They've been in the press recently or been discussed more broadly. So there's a low proportion of GPs to the population. There's the uncertain future of Orsett Hospital. There's the development of the new diagnostic centre in the borough. There's the opening of the Corringham Integrated Medical Wellbeing Centre as one of initially 4 intended, although the other 3 haven't been able to progress because the situation has changed and the funding rules have changed more recently. And then there's the establishment of the 4 integrated locality teams. Members are asked to note the estate update in the paper and also the progress now being made on the 4 integrated locality teams, which are beginning to deliver real benefits to our patients and our communities through better multidisciplinary ways of working, which is increasing capacity of the services to deliver. Additionally, it updates on the progress of the Estates Group, which was established in June 2024. For various reasons, the original intention to build the further 3 centres, wellbeing centres, isn't currently viable. It's too early to predict what opportunities the future may hold, but we have really progressed on trying to look at short-term opportunities to support the delivery of the 4 integrated locality teams, whilst further scoping and appraisal work takes place. So within the paper, there are proposals around South Ockenden, Tilbury, Purfleet and Grays. These proposals are beginning to really deliver strong benefits. There are significant challenges ahead, but certainly coming into my role relatively recently, I also see some real opportunities because of the level of the relationships between ourselves, the NHS and voluntary sector partners within the borough, and also a commitment, genuine commitment to support place-based delivery in the borough. So I just want to give that as an introductory to the paper. Thank you.
Just mate, thanks for digging me out there. It was my faux pas there. We'd arranged that we were going to do that, and I completely forgot because my boss distracted me, and I'm blaming Claire. But
so maybe if I could say a few words. So I'm Tom Abel. I'm the relatively new Chief Executive at the Integrated Care Board. And so before Mike dives into some of the detail in terms of some of the specific initiatives which are going on, I think just wanted to recognise and kind of support what Rob said in terms of we do recognise that there is significant work to do to improve the quality of kind of estate and premises within general practice and more broadly in the community within Thurrock. Obviously, as we've set out within the paper, currently the context in terms of the financial viability of capital developments has been somewhat limited in recent years, partly due to there being quite significant restrictions on capital within to support general practice development. So just to kind of put that into context, and the NHS kind of nationally allocates around £2 million a year for general practice capital in Mid and South Essex, as in the entire ICB area, of which about £1.5 million spent on GPIT, so the things, the computers and everything else. And so that clearly has not, does not give us sufficient flexibility in order to make some of the more strategic investments that we would want to make. And then secondly, also the historic mechanism by which we've looked to develop and improve general practice estate is by looking at kind of development options, working with the third-party organisations, the costs of which we would meet through rental reimbursement. The cap on the rental reimbursement rate that we're allowed to pay within the NHS is set on district value valuations, and those valuations were, and that cap was set pre-COVID. And as we all know, the cost of inflation and the cost of building materials, etc., has increased significantly since COVID, and therefore that makes that route not viable at the moment. People may have seen within the budget there is some provision being made in terms of investment into general practice. Quite what that will result in, we don't know yet, but that is something that we're keeping a really close eye on to make sure that we get our fair share of that in Thurrock. And secondly, also, we are lobbying and feeding alongside other ICBs, because clearly this doesn't just affect us, in terms of looking at whether that cap can be lifted in order to support more significant and more substantial redevelopment and improvement of the healthcare estate within Thurrock, and obviously more broadly across Mid and South Essex. And so something we are committed to do. We are working across the NHS to develop an infrastructure strategy, which will complete over the course of the remainder of the financial year. The intention of that is to look at all of the health assets that we have across Mid and South Essex, because obviously that will also potentially give us the opportunity to co-locate services and to potentially raise additional capital which we can invest in newer, more fit-for-purpose estate for the future. And so that will take a few more months for us to finalise, but I think we'll start to lay out a path by which we can take a much more strategic view in terms of the improvement of estate. But Mike will talk a little bit more specifically about some of the exact kind of projects that we've got going on at the moment, and some of the things that we hope to get over the line in the kind of coming weeks and months. So Mike, over to you.
Thanks, Tom. So in that really important context that both Rob and Tom set out, so the estates group that was convened, and it's very much a multi-agency partner group, council providers, ICB, have looked at what options we could capitalise on from our existing estate. And I think it's important just to stress that this was about utilising the existing estate, where we might be able to identify opportunities, sort of minor refurbishment work or repurposing, not new builds. That's subject to the parameters that have been set in that context. So very much pragmatism and what opportunities. So we went through, and all the partners have given suggestions, given opportunities, and that's what's set out in the paper, and I'll be happy to take questions in a moment. I think a couple of positive ones that are already progressing, primary care ones around South Ockenden and Stifford Clays that will be progressing in the next month or so in terms of actually getting the work done. Those were ones that fell outside of the issue that Tom's just described around district value, so they were repurposing within the existing parameters and rules, so we've been able to move those a bit forward. The opportunities that have come up in Tilbury, we need to do a bit more scoping, but again, they are vacant premises that won't require whole-scale rebuilding type works, but they will require some works. They will all need to go through the appropriate sort of governance and decision making, but we've identified ones that we think have got an opportunity to progress as a business case to go to the appropriate body to do so. And sort of, if you like, hot off the press, then the Purfleet one, which I was probably anxious about, the first floor on the care centre, is the largest space, but also the one that's probably got the biggest cost because it requires having a lift installed and so forth. But potentially we might be able to apply Section 106 to those. So we're looking actively as an ICB in Thurrock, but across the other alliances, to how we might make best of Section 106 opportunities, and Purfleet is a potential for Section 106. So again, we might be able to identify the funding from an existing route that doesn't cause a burden on asking from anyone else. So it's a mixed bag, but deliberately so, because we've been opportunistic and tried to look where we can, where that might be, what organisation, and that's the options that were set out. So you'll see the papers to note, but I guess we're looking for sort of informal support that this is a good direction to go in, and that we will pursue the works and the further appraisals and get this sort of specialist estates advice that we'll need on some of these schemes. But we do that at pace and try to get that in the next few months with a view to getting some of these implemented and off the ground practically in the coming months. But I'm happy to take questions at that point, Chair.
Indeed. I know, well, I'll throw it home to the floor, but we did discuss a couple of questions at our pre-meeting last night, and I know Councillor Fish has a question, so if you're happy to take said step.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Actually, my questions have been answered. I'm happy with the answers.
There you go then. So was anybody else? Yep, Councillor Arnold.
Thank you, Chair. I absolutely appreciate and get where we are with not having IMCs moving on. All of that doesn't need explaining anymore. I get it. We need to move on. But there was a cost to those kind of 5 years of designing, redesigning, scoping, rescoping, changing, working out whether you can or can't do it. We've seen it in council as well, where we've spent I don't know, around about 35 million, I think, to not rejuvenate Purfleet in designing and scoping and the underpass. These things happen. But I'd just like to understand the cost that occurred to the taxpayer on that, and also the cost. I know it's not something you can answer tonight. I appreciate that. And the cost of this extra scoping and the exercise and all the salaries of those involved in it, the whole thing. And also, like, we as a council need to learn when to stop and pull the plug a bit sooner so that we don't waste so much money on things. What lessons are you learning from what happened in the previous 5 years to apply in the future to not waste as much money maybe going forward?
Maybe I'll say a few words, and then Mike, you might have some reflections as well. So I don't know the number, but that is something we can take away and have a look at in terms of the cost of the kind of the scoping and development work around the original proposals. I think the lessons learned is making sure you've got a really clear funding route early on, and you've got pretty good confidence that that funding route will hold up, because that's clearly what happened in this particular case. And so partly that's kind of what I was saying in terms of the context, in terms of we don't want to commit ourselves to something where we aren't confident there's a really clear way how it will be paid for. So that's why we're doing some of the things that Mike's described, because we know that we've got a funding route and they are deliverable. Clearly, before we commit to anything larger, we need to see how some of these other things play out, both in terms of the infrastructure strategy, looking at, is there existing premises that could be repurposed or indeed co-located with a disposal, or, there's a variety of routes for that. Indeed, alongside any change there may be nationally in terms of the allocations that the NHS get for particularly general practice capital that we can utilise, and then we can proceed on that basis. So I think that's got to be a really early check on any future development, is we're really confident that there's a way it can be paid for, rather than kind of hoping that we'll be able to make it work out in the end, if that makes sense.
If I could just add then on the current project, and you did ask about that as well. So there's the work that's been undertaken so far, and the people who've engaged in that, and you illustrate the membership of the group in the paper. That's all from people's existing jobs, so no, it's not additional. So we're doing this so you'll see your officers all have day jobs for which they're giving up a bit of time to support me in doing this. I've got a bit of my role carved out, but it's not a full-time job for me. So at the moment, it's not additional cost to the system, to any one organisation. As we progress these options, there may be some professional fees, but I would expect that to be relatively low-key. That's about the estates professionals coming and doing their bit in looking at buildings and saying whether you need to dig up all the drains and that sort of thing. But again, we can source some of that from existing organisations as well. So it's not costing at this moment in time, and I don't expect it to be a significant additional cost to do the business cases and to progress them.
Yeah, Councillor Manley.
Thank you for this report. It's really insightful, because I know I asked before a previous meeting about what was happening with the plans. I'm kind of bouncing off of Councillor Arnold's point. So obviously we all understand that IMC is not happening and that this is the work that's going ahead, which is great. But are there any sort of like concrete timelines as to when we can expect any of this to be done? Because I mean, I think a big problem with what happened with the IMCs is that people promised that for such a long period of time. It was like 5 years. And one of the biggest questions I get in my ward is, okay, so that's not happening. So what's going to be done with said land? Like, are we going to see anything else? And I can never really give a concrete answer to that. So I know you've said that basically some work has been done, but there's still some more work to go. I get that generally, but is there any sort of concrete timeline? So that if anyone was to ask me, okay, what's going on with the IMCs, I could give them some sort of a answer. And sorry, also, one more thing, which might not be with you. It's just a small thing, not to nitpick, but in the conclusions, 2.6, it says Tilbury Civic Square, Brennan Road, with feasibility assessments undertaken by end January 2024. Is that meant to read 2025? I just wanted to clarify that, because if that's the case, it should probably be corrected in the report, but that's it from me.
Thank you, and thank you for spotting that. So it is January 2025, because that gives us the December 24 and January 25 are the timescales that are set out for completing the work to say, yes, there's a business case here that can go into the appropriate governance route, and once it gets approval, some of them can be approved quite quickly. Where they're relatively small scale works, they can be turned over in a couple of weeks, potentially. So if, for example, we're just using a small amount of unused or unspent BCF money where we've applied that to the works in the GP practices, that can be done in a matter of weeks in terms of the approval, and then the works depends on the sort of contractors to do that, but that tends to be a couple of months. So in terms of the overall timeline, I'd say so December, January to firm up the proposals and get the sort of decision making going, and then generally it would be 2 to 3 months for work. So in the case of the Purfleet, which is the one I said needs a lift installation, which is a more notable piece of work in my amateur approach to it, is that NHS Property, we've said 2 to 3 months to do that work, to do the minor sort of cosmetic refurbishment of the rooms that are up there, but the lift being the main sort of structural work, so 2 to 3 months. So we're really, you know, I don't want to promise because I'm aware of previous promises, but we'd be looking to sort of March period, so towards the end of this financial year, where you would see some tangible, you know, progress and things that would have happened. In the case of, as I said, sort of South Ockenden and Stifford Clays, that would be, you know, those will be completed before that period, but they're relatively small scale. So I don't want to sort of say, you know, oh, look at that. That's on the smaller end. The Purfleet or the Tilbury ones, which would probably involve more works, would more be towards the March period. And I think that's a reasonable sort of spread of a period.
So can I come back to that quickly? So in terms of, okay, March, is that when it's going to be operational? Or is that just when like the sites are going to be ready to be kind of like operationalized in terms of like staff and like actually getting some use out of it?
So if I was to, again, I'll take Purfleet as an illustration, because that's one where that people are desperate to potentially use that because it's a good sized space, and I've had adult social care knocking on my door saying we need some place to put lots of people. I would expect if people are going to be moving into the facility by that March period, so that would be people being able to access and use the building. So if it's for co-location, office type accommodation, then that's the period that I would expect for them to be able to do so. If in the case, again, using Purfleet, if we want to, are able to convert some of that into clinical treatment opportunities in that area, that might be a bit longer because the providers will then need to mobilise around that in terms of their staffing and where those staff are. So that might be a bit of a longer period if we were to use it. But the basic premise of accommodation for staff and co-location would be in that timescale that I've described.
Okay, that's really useful. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, we're talking about lessons learned, and I think what you said, one of the lessons learned is to ensure you have a proper funding trail. I find that hard to believe as or take as a lesson, because surely that would have been, when you're paying for anything, that would have been the first thing you should be looking at. So if you're saying that's a lesson learned now, what have you put in place to ensure we will have a proper funding for the next round or whatever it is we're looking for, please?
Yeah, I can. Yeah. So obviously, I wasn't involved in the detail of the original conversations with the CCGs at the time, but I think as part of the infrastructure strategy that's being developed, that will clearly set out these are the funding routes that are available to us, and therefore this is what we think we can reasonably afford over the course of the next 3-5 years or so, and so we've got that confidence straight up at the beginning, and we're ready to go in terms of the plan. So, and then in terms of the ICB decision-making process, we now have a specific estates and infrastructure group which has been established, and so early eyes on any sort of proposal that's being developed to make sure that it's feasible, deliverable and affordable so before we get too far down the road. So there's a kind of, our internal processes I think have changed, so we can make sure that we're having that conversation and applying those tests early on before anything gets gets developed too far.
You okay, Councillor Johnson? Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, Chair. I think this is probably more for you, Robert. It's about 2.5 on page 35, the developing locality neighbourhood teams. I've been very lucky. I kind of was privileged to see the Corringham Integrated Medical Centre right from being empty to opening and running. And I know how well that can work and how great it is to see those relationships and that cross-working. And I've been an advocate of pulling that forward, so it's really good to see this is happening. How confident are you, considering we've lost maybe key history and relationships from the exec level? How confident are you that you can keep those relationships going? And are there still key staff such as Rita Facaria still involved, who I don't think you could do this without her, if I'm honest. And
Yes, and she's not going anywhere. So just to give you an indication, me arriving. So I went to, I've visited Corringham. I've also met all the other 3 locality. I've met all 4 locality teams. One thing I'm really impressed by is actually the significant number of staff. We may change and move around a bit and things like that, but the number of staff who stay consistent operationally, both within the NHS and the local authority. You know, I know that sort of NHS and local authorities have their churn and things like that, but operation frontline, I get the impression that people in Thurrock like the work and they like to stay. So what we have is we have really strong embedded relationships with people who are really committed to doing the best for the residents of Thurrock. So yes, sorry, I was a bit glib before, but Rita, she's jointly appointed with NEFT and the council. She reports to me. She's absolutely integral to this on both sides. And I've met colleagues through the Thurrock Integrated Care Alliance, both in the NHS and colleagues within the council, who are absolutely committed to making this locality team approach work, and the benefits which are listed in 2.5, I think, as well, you know, around improved relations. The relationships can improve further, but the relationships are already there, and that's critical, because when you have the difficult conversations you need to have the relationships strong enough to be able to kind of come through those. And because we've got the strength of those relationships on the ground, it means that we can really progress at pace. And you know, we are delivering kind of benefits. There's fewer handoffs because clinicians and other professions are working in a more integrated way, and so the patients are benefiting from this, and I see that just continuing for the future, and I'm quite excited by the opportunity.
Okay. I've got a couple of, I mean, I'm a little bit worried. I mean, Rita is tremendous, but I think we ought to be on commission, because every time we meet, her pay grade goes up about another 10%, so you might be saying a rod for your own back there. Yeah, I've just got 2 questions, factually. The first one is a question I often get answered, get asked, and I don't really know the answer, and I'm hoping that probably Mike can. Previously, there was land adjacent to Hog Lane in Grays, basically behind Rates Garage, that was considered as a prospective site in 2009-2010 for development by the then Thurrock Thames Gateway Development Corporation as a new community hospital for Thurrock. If you may not remember, but there was a certain amount of moving people about. We moved the Army Cadets, the Royal Mail sorting office was moved, and they were provided with new buildings to create this parcel of land. When the TGC disappeared in Eric Pickle's bonfire of the Quangos, Thurrock inherited all the assets of the TGDC. Do you know what happened to that land? Is it still part of our portfolio of assets?
The short answer is no, but I had the question today in advance, so we are seeking to get you an answer on that one. So I can't give it you at this moment in time, no.
Okay, because I think it's really pertinent, because that has to be a massively valuable piece of land. And if it's sat there and nobody knows we've got it, that is desperately worrying. But I look forward to an answer. And my other question, and it may in a way tee up, I notice as part of the team, and I'm sure this is just a purely financial thing, but Thurrock Council's, from our finance directorate, we've got an asset disposals senior surveyor as part of the team. That doesn't mean that we're looking around to what we can get rid of, is it?
Not in this project, no. This is all about people coming with opportunities, but making sure we've got the expertise around the table from the council.
Great, thanks very much indeed. Right, speaking of opportunities, we're lucky enough tonight to have with us, while we may be missing Councillor Hooper, and his dour tones, we've got the ebullient Lynn Watson, who is the director of Good Growth and whose workload and portfolio encompasses many of the things that were there. And I didn't know whether you wish to comment and just pass an overview or give us any insight into what you plan for the next few years.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to speak. So I'm Lee Watson. I am the portfolio holder for Good Growth, if you don't know me. So a couple of questions I really wanted to ask is, I've read through some of your reports, and in a lot of that you're requiring funding, but actually the council has quite a Section 106 money that is waiting for use to come for, and you haven't done it in years and years and years. So what is your plan behind that? Because a lot of that is about refurbishing buildings that are sitting currently in there that we are letting go to waste. And my second question is, what are you going to do to enhance over the next 10 years additional health provision in this borough for our community? Because I haven't seen any of that either. Thanks.
Shall I start? And then Mike might want to come in. So in terms of the Section 106 money, yeah, I completely agree. In terms of we have not been good at utilising that effectively anywhere within Mid and South Essex. And so obviously, as Mike set out, some of these areas may well be, and projects may well be funded through 106 money, but I've asked the team to do a specific exercise to look at the available Section 106 money that we have across Mid and South Essex in its entirety and look at what we can do to look at developing and identifying schemes to improve the quality of healthcare estate at speed. Because you're quite right, we've got that money there and we're not using it, and it's there for that very purpose. And so I think in the next couple of months we'll have some firmer proposals in terms of how we intend to utilise that money to improve healthcare estate. More generally in terms of the second point, which I think was more generally in terms of health service provision, obviously there has been developments. Obviously, you know, we have got the Corringham IMWC, which has been developed. We have got the Community Diagnostic Centre, which is in the process of being developed, which is a significant investment and will significantly expand the availability of diagnostic tests for the communities in South Essex. So there is some investment coming into Thurrock, and there will be some expansion in terms of the range of services that are available for the people of Thurrock. More generally, and as kind of is alluded to within this paper, clearly longer term, we need to look at what we can do to rebalance the way we provide healthcare in Mid and South Essex. So we are providing more care in the community in a more preventative way to reduce the need of people or likelihood of people running into crisis and therefore requiring to go into hospital and things like that. That is part of our medium-term planning work that's going on at the moment. And indeed, Preeti and Zeph will probably talk a little bit about that being in terms of the aspiration and the role the hospital has to play in that space. But as part of the work that we're doing through our medium-term plan that we'll probably be coming back here, I suspect, in a few months' time to talk to you about and to get your views on, it's going to be that significant rebalancing of care out of secondary care holistically into the community so we can keep people weller for longer and getting the care that they need much closer to home. Some of that will involve estates, but also some of that will involve us working differently and working in people's homes and things like that. And so I think give us a few months to work up some proposals and ideas, which we can then kind of perhaps come and talk to you some more about once we've got some drafts to discuss.
I echo obviously everything Tom said, and specifically, as I said earlier, we were looking at 2 Section 106s for the Perfleet opportunity that's in the paper, and we're going through as the Thurrock Alliance each of the opportunities for all the Section 106s to see whether we can apply them to any of these opportunities. But I've identified a couple already.
Thank you. I think my other question is, as we go along, there is more planning developments coming through. As we saw, East Tilbury, for instance, has got another 1,000. And I don't think the NHS side is actually taking into consideration how many more residents are coming in. So is there an opportunity that we could sort of work more collaboratively together, that alongside whatever is coming through in Good Growth, actually the NHS is there by the side going, you know what, I don't need section 106. I'll take that based on whatever the floor spacage is, but we're going to build a new building instead. And we can involve that within that plan and application with that developer, than just going on a formula that's all it is, that, to be honest, it's just sitting there for years and years and years. And you're just picking up now, but actually that could have been out in our community the last 10 years ago. So I think, like, going forward, it needs to be more joined up. And I think you've got to recognise that the growth in this borough, and we haven't got many GPs, and you're going to see that later on in the paper, is, to be honest with you, you're not catching up with that. And that needs to go forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Lee, and thank you, Mike. And if you speak in, well, you won't be speaking, but we probably need to make more use of the microphones. I think you get a bit nearer. Yeah, I would like to thank you for coming along this evening. And Councillor Arnold.
Sorry, Chair, we didn't hear a word of the answer. So if we could have your answer again to the question prior to what Councillor Watson's just said, because you put your mic on but you turned round. We couldn't hear this side of the room what the answer was.
The previous answer was yes, in terms of the Section 106s and looking how we capitalise on those. And as an example that I gave earlier on, so perfectly, for example, we've identified 2 Section 106s that could be applied to that, and we will continue to do that for all the Section 106 opportunities. That's in addition to, as Tom said, the ICB looking across the board at Section 106s, because we recognise, as he said, that we've not, as the NHS, capitalised on them in the past. So just say we are doing it, and there are some practical examples that we are cultivating.
Do you have a question or anything following on?
No, sorry, I just needed to hear the answer to quite an important question.
No, that's good. Well, I'll summarise. As I say, thanks, Tom, Mike, and Rob also. I think we touched there on the secret to the way forward here, and colleagues in a minute are going to talk about the 10-year strategic plan for the Health Trust, which is fundamentally important. But we come in at this from it's a triangle. It's the hospital acute provision, it's the ICB, and it's the council. Whatever makeup the council may be over 10 years, it is a 3-way deal. And I think if I'm going to be critical of the ICB, Tom, as an observer of all things Thurrock very closely, the origins for us were that we used to have a PCT based in Thurrock. We then got rid of that and we were given a CCG based in Thurrock. We've now got an organisation deciding our healthcare based in Chelmsford, I believe, or wherever it is that they are. And that, you know, it's great. It's got bigger, it's wider, and in some ways can be advantageous. But the theme that we've said is, I really welcome the fact you're talking about coming back to this committee. And any time you wish to come and talk to this committee, I'm sure if you wish to go and talk to other colleagues directly, that would be great. But we're not the enemy. We are here. We may sometimes prod you with sticks, but we've also got solutions in this committee because we've got local knowledge. So I thank you for what you say. And without any reminding by my colleague, I'll move on to the recommendations. 1.1, to note the progress of the Estates Group in identifying short-term opportunities and to support the further scoping and appraisals work set out in paragraph 2.6. We agreed to note that. And secondly, to note the development, sorry.
I just have a quick question. When you say short-term, or when it says short-term opportunities, what does that mean?
I'll hand that one over.
So short-term in this context means the options that have been put into the paper, and as described earlier, are basically between now and that March-April period, those ones in the next 3-4 months, subject to any others that may be identified in the coming weeks or whatever, but that's what we mean by short-term, as opposed to new build and the more strategic sort of developments that you've touched upon in here. So very much about these ones being short-term.
That makes sense. I thought I read that in a different way. No, I agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. Yeah, and the second recommendation, 1.2, to note the development of the integrated locality teams in Thurrock, which was the second part of the report. Everybody note that? Thank you. And so we will move on to the next item, which is our colleagues from the Mid and South Essex NHS Foundation Trust are going to give us a briefing on the 10-year strategy. It is a little, not a short-term one, 10-year strategy development. And I believe that's going to be presented to us by Preeti Sud. Is that correct? Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'm Preeti Sood. I'm the Director of Strategy and Innovation. I will take the paper as read, just a short summary. So the paper talks about why we are talking about a 10-year strategy for the hospital and why now. And it pertains to, we merged, so the 3 hospitals, Basildon, Southend and Broomfield, merged on 1st of April 2020. And at that point in time, we were in the first few weeks of the pandemic. So at that point in time, the board and the executive agreed to look at some short-term, so 3-year strategic goals for the organization while we settled, the environment settled, before we looked at more longer-term strategy and direction of travel for the hospital. We are a £1.4 billion organization catering to the population of Mid and South Essex, 1.2 million with 16,000 staff. 82% of our staff live locally, so we're not only talking about catering to the, when we talk about communities, we are also talking about our own staff, our own family and friends who receive care locally. Late last year, 2023, early 2024, the board agreed that now we were in a position to look at a more longer-term plan for the hospital in the context of the size, the opportunities available now, and the future direction of travel. What we have done so far is have conversations with partners, with our staff, with local communities, and we have learned from various examples. So we met with Kim as an example to use the knowledge that we have locally here to learn from what the communities are saying. So we've used all of that. Where we currently are, and that is what the paper talks about, are we've identified the 4 key priority areas. We are focusing on communities because we are a very large provider of health services in the community, and it would be short-sighted for us to only look at patients when they walk through. It's about that holistic care that Tom mentioned. And this was crowdsourced, so this is what came out of the conversations. And what has followed over the last couple of months is the national direction of travel, which is being consulted through the 10-year plan, which is around focusing on that shift of care in the right place, so left shift, moving from analog to digital and moving to more towards the prevention of care. So the 4 key priority areas that we've identified and discussed at the board have been presented in the paper. It talks about focusing on our local communities that thrive, on our people, which is, when we say people, we mean our staff, on services and having the right service in the right place, looking at value for money, but high quality, high performing services with improved outcomes for the local communities, and looking at partnerships. And these are kind of long-term strategic partnerships locally, regionally, and nationally based on the assets we have in the hospital. So that's what we've presented in the paper. We are genuinely here to listen, gather feedback so that we can put the meat on the bones. The planned publication of the 10-year strategy document is for spring of 2025, and one of the reasons is because we know there's a national 10-year plan that is being developed concurrently, and we have to have a lot of conversations locally as well so that we can develop, kind of align it to all the other conversations that are happening here. That's kind of my brief on the paper.
Question. I know, Councillor Fish, you have a question?
Yeah, my question was about the government's 10-year plan and your 10-year plan, how they were going to work together, but you've actually answered it in your preamble there, so that's fine. Yeah.
Oh, you're getting denied, Tony. Think of another question, quick. Councillor Arnold.
Thank you, Chair. On page 40, the second paragraph, you say, following extensive engagement, evidence gathering, analysis, and you say, community and staff are widely engaged with, but we haven't got any evidence of the engagement or some of the bones of how you came to these 7 priorities. And so assuming there was like a survey or an online thing, I just wondered the number of people representing across, like as a percentage of the whole area that you're covering. I mean, sometimes we've seen surveys done with the council where we've got 175,000 residents and we're basing decision making on less than 0.5%. So I just wonder what the percentage engagement was. And then my other question is really to Health Watch over there, and if they felt they were extensively engaged with on the strategy, if that's okay.
Yep, thank you. So I think we have, so percentage-wise, what we have done is we have built on all the conversations that have happened so far. So you mentioned Jeff did the engagement from the local communities. We're talking about the same communities. So we have community organizations, general practice, community and voluntary sector organizations who already gather feedback from those local communities. So what we've done is we've built on that rather than engaging with the 1.2 million directly. However, having engaged with Health Watch, so as an example, when we met with Kim, we asked for kind of Health Watch's data on what is the local community talking about, what are the key pain points, and where do we need to kind of focus our energy on. I can give you the percentages, but we are very keen that the engagement is consistent. It's not a one-off, just happened there, now we're not going to talk to you. As a foundation trust, we also have around 40-odd governors who also have connections in the local community. So we developed toolkits when we were initially earlier in the year talking about what is good, what do we want to improve. So there are different kind of sets of questions that we have consistently collected on. So we've developed toolkits and given to our staff. As I said, we have 16,000 staff who, of which 82% live locally. So it's about our own families, our own friends. So we've used that cascade effect to gather feedback instead of kind of running just one survey and saying, yes, we have 100, 200 questionnaires. We also built on some of the programs of work. So as you've heard, we're developing CDCs. There's a large outpatients transformation program. And these are the same conversations we are having with our patients. Even today at Southend Hospital, we had a stall in the foyer where we were talking both to our staff and our patients who were walking through. So we're finding every opportunity. At the end of the program, when we publish the final report, we'll look at the numbers, but we're not trying to only cater. The 10-year thing does not happen over these 2 months and then we won't talk to you. So we're trying to find every opportunity. And when we initially set out to do this, we did kind of put that down as one of our aims, that we will build on the information we have rather than create new information, because it's not new information. We know what are the key challenges. We know what we need to change. It's about how do we bring that together. And yeah, Kim's team gave us lots of reports, so I'll let Kim answer that.
Thank you. Yes, we have met and we have forwarded lots of our reports that we've done over the years with the public or with people in Thurrock. We still send that information as and when it comes. There's 3 health watches that cover that area, which is Southend, Essex and us. We all work together to make sure that any information that we had, even if we'd picked it up just in doing events out in the community and the hospital had been mentioned, we've forwarded that information as well. There hasn't been an actual questionnaire that's gone out because I think that we've gathered that information as questions all the time. You know, as we go along, we ask those questions. So I do feel that people were actively involved in it. Wasn't all of them by any stretch of the imagination, but it's very easy to pick up information about the hospital if you just go and ask people. So we absolutely have been involved in it.
Thank you, Kim, and with great anticipation. Councillor Fish.
Yeah, what just struck me, looking at the outcome of the consultation, did any of the feedback that you had surprise you?
To some extent, I think being a person who vaccine strategy, I should say yes, but no, because I mean, ideally, some of these conversations we've been having for some time. So obviously the 7 themes that came out initially, which were used as critical questions for the board to consider. The first one was the here and now. 10 years seems a bit too far. What is happening here and now? How are we going to move from, how are we going to build on where we are right now in the context of we have financial challenges, operational challenges, you're talking about 10 years, what does that look like? So I think it was not a surprise. I think those were the right questions, and I was very happy that they came out the way they came out, because that just reinforces the direction of travel for us. Some of the conversations, again, Tom spoke about, and I was speaking to my colleague around primary care. I think we need to do more about partnership. And it was not a surprise, but that just reinforces that we need to find more ways of working more closely together for local communities. And I think there's a reason why we're not saying putting patient first at this point in time, because patients are first. That's why our doors are open. But for us, we are the only hospital in Mid and South Essex when you compare to other systems where there are a couple of hospitals. So we play a very key role in the community care, and hence some of the other programs that we run and colleagues in the council we very closely work with are around anchor programs. So looking at employment for people furthest away from employment. As a hospital, how can we have that kind of impact on our communities? Because we know a job means kind of knockover effect on better health in the future. So yeah, none of them were surprising, but they just reinforced, and it helps when you're trying to have that conversation both at a strategic level and at a local level. So when we're talking about partnership with primary care or GPs, we're not only talking about what is the conversations we are having at a board level, but to our local services, what do you do after you've discharged the patient from a surgery? What is your role in picking up the phone and having that conversation about who's removing the sutures? Is the patient coming in? What is available in the community? And I know Kim mentioned the discharge work, and Michelle Stapleton is on top of it. But those are we just need to empower and help our staff do that themselves as well. So it talks about different levels of engagement. So,
if I might add to Preeti's comments, my name's Zephon Trent. I'm the Chief Strategy and Transformation Officer at Mid and South Essex NHS Foundation Trust, and recently joined the Trust, and delighted to be working with Preeti on this. I don't think the conclusions were a surprise, but I really want to make sure that we're all on the same page that they will require changes to achieve them. And I think the example given earlier, talking about how do we really work in partnership with patients, and we see those people, and I personally, I really like to use the word people rather than patients, because it describes all of us. How do we really work in partnership with people from our local communities? That's something we know we can do better as a trust than we've done in the past. And they're quite simple, the four headlines, but they are meaningful, and they will require change for us. So, that working with our communities, that making sure our services are genuinely sustainable. And colleagues have talked with great clarity in this meeting about the pressures that we're under operationally, financially, and from a quality perspective. Our ambition with this strategy is that we make those services sustainable, and we address those issues in the way that we do that. So I think it wasn't a surprise, but it will require change, and it will require commitment, and we really want to do that in partnership with local authorities, with the ICB, with other partners in the third sector and beyond. And that will be a change for us as an organisation. We can do more in that.
Any other questions from the floor? Okay, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Arnold.
Sorry, yeah. I mean, integrated care partnership, that's where everybody was sitting. I was on it for a couple of years. That's been going for a long time. So, yeah, we do know all of these things, but nothing's really been done with it. And here we are doing another strategy that is for 10 years when we know the world can flip on a coin like COVID within a couple of years. So when are you actually going to walk the walk, I suppose? We're talking the talk again, and we're talking the talk to cover the next 10 years. When are you actually going to start walking the walk?
I think it's a great question. We're trying to do that right now. So we're already leaning into these challenges within the Trust, trying to make the changes that we need to improve services, to make them more sustainable. And some of those decisions are not easy as well, but we're leaning into them right now. We talk about 10 years because I think, and you know, the government's also talking about 10 years in its strategy and vision, because that's the time frame over which we really need to look to realise some of the full benefits that can be achieved. But I'll be absolutely clear with the committee, this is going to lead to changes right away, and it's going to help guide our decision making from the moment that we approve the strategy. In fact, the work that Preeti and our teams have done is already informing our decision making. So no, this is a strategy that will come into practice right away, and it needs to align to the medium-term planning that Tom referred to earlier. Thank you.
Anybody else question? Right, okay, just to sum up, I do welcome this report to us. I do welcome you turning up to this meeting this evening. But I will reiterate a concern that I was on the predecessor of this committee when it was the health and well-being. And the Foundation Trust got into a habit of turning up at meetings with a half-baked report with very little detail in it. And I'm going to be really unkind, because that's the job of this committee sometimes, and say you've produced a document here that's got 19 paragraphs in it, if you count them. It's about formulating a strategy for 10 years that's going to affect this borough. There's not one word in there that says Thurrock. Not one word. Now, I really do not understand how the strategy makers and the policy decision makers within your trust can turn up with a brief that you've got to talk about the strategy here. You mentioned being in Southend Hospital in the foyer having a presentation. Great, you know, good luck to Southend, good luck to Mid-Essex. I'm really not interested in them in the broader sense. I'm interested in Thurrock. I would ask, I'd say, thank you for coming. It's a nice, flowery piece of prose. I would love you to accept an invitation in 6 months when you're further down the consultation process, when March 2025 has gone, when you're now into your new strategy. And I don't know what formation this committee will be by then, but we can add it to our keeping an eye on work programme and invite you to come back and talk to us about what the 10-year strategy for Thurrock is. Because that is what really, really, really interests us. And our job as councillors is to represent the best interests of Thurrock. Lovely to see what goes on in Malden. Nice to hear about what's happening in Southend. But we're elected to represent people in Thurrock. As I say, I'm going to say no more than that. Thank you for coming. I do appreciate you putting your head in the lion's mouth. But you know, just bear in mind what we're looking for from the Foundation Trust. You know, we feel a little bit in Thurrock. I think probably most people say we're the last port of call. We're the one that's left out. We're always out on a limb in Thurrock, and yet we've actually got probably the greatest need. At which point there's no recommendation. We just have to note that item and say thank you for coming, and we'll move on to the final substantive part of this evening's meeting, which is again a subject very close to everyone's heart, and I would ask Will Guy to present a witness session briefing note, it says here, on GP shortages.
With your indulgence, Chair, I might just say a few words and then hand over to Will. So, obviously, I think the paper is fairly self-explanatory in terms of, so I think one of the things I just want to be really clear about is that we recognise that there has for some time been a shortage in terms of GP provision within Thurrock, and as Will talk about, there has been, I think, some good work in terms of starting to turn the ship on that and to rectify that. We do recognise that there's significant progress that needs to be made to continue that pace of progress, but I do think some of the foundations and building blocks are coming into place in terms of the number of learning organisations or training practices that we now have in the patch, which I think is good, and also the expansion that we've seen in the broader clinical workforce in terms of other roles within GP surgeries across Thurrock. So I think just to say, obviously we recognise that there's more work to be done. We'll talk a bit about some of the good work that's been done, but this is something that we're going to want to, I think, collectively keep a close eye on as it progresses over the course of the next few years. But Will, do you want to talk to some of the specifics?
Thank you very much, Tom and Chair. So if I can just pick up some of the key points from the paper. So I think, as Tom says, we recognise there is significant work still to go on this agenda. I think as an ICB, we have tried to act quite quickly in terms of identifying opportunities for increasing GP numbers in a sustainable way in this patch. It's probably worth just caveating, although I don't want to wash my hands of this. We have only been delegated to look after primary care services since 2021. And in terms of our primary care workforce responsibilities, it's a similar time frame. So we have seen an upward trend in that time. I'm sure there's good work being done by Health Education England before that. But I think since it's come down to ICB level, it's really allowed us to focus on kind of detailed initiatives within Thurrock. The one I think that will have the greatest long-term benefit for Thurrock is that growth of training practices. So it's your traditional way of training the next generation of GPs is for them to go into general practice for about 3 years or so and train to be fully qualified GPs. What we do know is when GPs are trained in an area, they tend to stay in that area. Many people will stay their entire careers in a close proximity to where they have been trained. The number of training practices and the number of trainees within those practices has, trainers within those practices has significantly increased this year alone, and we're seeing quite a good upward trend in the number of trainees therefore coming through on that programme, kind of a 70% increase in the last few years, and we expect that to continue because of the commitment from practices to take those roles on. You would have heard before about the fellowship programme that was unique to Thurrock. So we did operate a fellowship programme across the entire system, but because of the deficit in GP numbers in this patch, we did a kind of an enhanced offer that was unique to Thurrock and only available to people who were coming to work in Thurrock. That scheme had some success. There are 5 GPs who are currently on that scheme. Unfortunately, because of national funding changes, we've had to put a hold on that this year. Those 5 GPs continue. We fully fund their schemes, but we've not been able to grow that scheme as much as we would like to. As an ICB, we want to review how we can potentially find local funding to make that initiative feasible again in future years. It is a model that seems to be attractive to trainees coming out of medical school. We know that people are looking for what are called portfolio careers, so kind of element of traditional general practice, an element of potentially a special interest, and so the fellowship roles are critical to that. We've also got a number of broader initiatives looking particularly around retention of GPs, trying to keep good experienced GPs in practice is obviously critical. It's all very well growing new GPs, but if you're losing them at a similar rate, then you're not actually making any headway on this. So we have got a number of system-wide schemes that are looking at retention and trying to keep good experienced GPs within the local system. I guess the biggest benefit that's happened in the last few years within this patch is around the growth of additional roles reimbursement staff within primary care networks. So these are new roles to general practice. They support the primary care workforce. They're not a direct replacement for GPs, and we won't pretend they are. However, they can provide a really valuable function in primary care, and particularly as our expectation about what primary care does expands as kind of needs change. There's been 82 additional roles reimbursement scheme staff employed in this system, and that number is likely to continue to grow. Nationally, there has been a change to that scheme that allows newly qualified GPs to be recruited through that scheme, so we may well see that happen in this patch as well. we obviously know, as Tom set out, we need to continue that work, continue that upward trajectory at a faster rate than the rest of our patch. That's not just to kind of stay still, but we have ambitions that more work will be done in primary care and more care will be provided in primary care. And at the heart of that is your GP base. And so that work has got to continue. And we say we will revisit the fellowship initiative to see whether we can get that recommenced in the new financial year.
Thank you, Will. Well, I'll open the floor to questions. I think you probably answered in that presentation some of the questions that I know colleagues have spoken about, but Councillor Heath, would you like to kick off with your particular question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Mine was about the fellowship programme and when we would have a decision on whether you were going to commence it, but you've already said that. Is it definite that it would start in the new financial year, or
so
do we not know?
We essentially we have a kind of a primary care development allocation, which we get told about in quarter four for the next financial year. We'll have to see what that is. It's made centrally by NHS England to us, and then we've got to go through the various priorities against that resource. So it'll probably be the early part of the new financial year we can make a decision.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Day.
Yes. Because of your initiative, Chairman, the pre-meetings that we have, of course, we forward the questions today to you, and we're getting them back, the answers already. So, but I'll read out a question from Councillor Rigby, and she asked, the media use the term physician associates. Are these doctors?
So no, they're not. They're essentially usually graduates who undertake a postgraduate qualification to fulfil certain functions in primary care, but it's under the auspices of a GP who will oversee what they're doing. They will undertake specific tasks on behalf of that GP, so it could be that they'll undertake health checks, that they'll get a patient history, those sort of things, but it's not a replacement for a GP, it's just another role within the primary care workforce.
Well, I'll report that back to, because it wasn't my question, to Councillor Rigby. I mean, I have a question, and it's many years ago, I was not that many years ago, that I was a councillor here before I was relieved of my post by Councillor Pangella. But I had my sabbatical, and I'm back. I only came back in May. But I'm hearing the same questions then as I am today. With previously, GPs were not attracted to Thurrock. And they're now are they now being paid more to practice in this area?
So on the whole, it's not a question of salaries. The GPs look for opportunities around career progression, partnership opportunities. If you're a newly qualified GP, you're looking for training and support from your colleagues within the practice. You're looking at facilities, etc., those sort of opportunities. The fact that we've established that training practice basis and foundation within this patch, I think is probably the biggest asset we now have here, rather than competitions on pay. I guess the challenge the practices have is they've got to make ends meet, and the more they pay for any individual member of staff, the less they can commit to other things. So they always try to look at other opportunities rather than just salaries.
Thank you. And out of the 12 GP fellows, how many are in the post now?
So it's just 5. Those 5 have remained in the scheme since they were appointed. When we initially went out, it was we were targeting 12. We didn't cap it at 5. It was 5 that initially came forward. Unfortunately, because we had to suspend the scheme because of the finances, it didn't necessarily get the momentum that I think would have then led to there being more and more appointments under that initiative. Hopefully, if we can recommence it, we can regain that momentum and get up to that 12, if not beyond.
I don't know if anyone else wants to ask any questions. Yes, we do.
Thank you, Chair. At the pre-meeting, I asked a specific question regarding the scheme in terms of the trainees scheme. My worry is when the scheme rolls out and we train some people to, support the GP practice, do we have what the contract will look like? How long will they stay on the post, and how are they able to commit to stay longer in Thurrock instead of using the resources and then leave after a period of time? So what's your answer to that, please?
So with both the fellowship scheme and the trainee schemes, the fellowship scheme's 2 years. Trainees usually are in a practice for about 3 years before they are kind of fully ready to go. Under both initiatives, the practice that's hosting them usually has a long-term intention of trying to retain those staff, or if they haven't got posts coming up, they will have discussions with neighbouring practices and try to identify what opportunities might exist for those staff locally. But certainly with the fellowship scheme, I'm sure all of those practices will want to retain the fellows well beyond their 2-year placement.
Any other? Councillor Watson, feel free. Dip in.
Sorry, can I just ask you a quick question in terms of the trainees? Where does that opportunity come from, being a trainee? Do you knock into something like the London Hospital, which has a whole teaching hospital for doctors and consultants? And is there an opportunity, if not, that we could tap into that in order for them to at least do a placement for a year or two out in Thurrock and learn the GP route?
So we've been really boosted in Essex by Anglia Ruskin and developed the medical school at Anglia Ruskin University. That has given us a local base for getting trainees into the system. Equally, we do link in with the schemes in London and beyond, as some of the Adam Brooks students will end up in Essex, etc. So it's quite a good network that exists to make sure that we are getting all the opportunities for people to come and work in Essex. But certainly it's the Anglia Ruskin Medical School that's made a massive difference, I think, in terms of local recruitment.
Thank you. Anybody else got a question? Yeah, Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Chair. It is only a briefing note that you've given to us, and I've read it, and it does exactly what it's set out to do, I suppose. But it finishes at the end by saying you indicate future intentions to increase GP numbers in the area, and I can read them. Are things getting better? Are you confident that things are going to get better, or are we just going to keep getting this kind of report all the time?
So we can't lie. I think it's fair to say that general practice is facing many challenges, as is the wider NHS. Certainly the impact of the budget will have to be worked through. We don't know what the national settlement is going to be for general practice, and the core contract that general practice has is specified at a national level and funded at a national level. We then commission kind of local services around that. That is critical to the sustainability of general practice and workforce decisions, and unless, fundamentally they're all small businesses, unless they can see a sustainable level of income, they can't commit to long-term recruitment of staff. What we want to do through work locally is make sure that where those opportunities are for local investment, we're doing that. We hope alongside a national offer that again gives the confidence to the partners, the GP partners, business owners to make those decisions to recruit and retain staff. It is a challenging position, as I say, but one that I think we're committing to trying to work alongside that national offer to get right locally. And certainly we've got an increased level of GP involvement in what we're doing and decisions we're making, which I think is helping, gives confidence to them that we are heading in the right direction.
Anybody else? Question? Okay, I've sort of got an observation as much as a question, and again, hopefully it's something that you guys take away and colleagues who sit in cabinet take away. As was mentioned earlier on, that I'm not saying it's a war chest or a pirate's hoard, but there is considerable opportunity in Thurrock to make best use of Section 106 money, which seems to have not necessarily been on your radar from what was said earlier on. And you talk about the challenge of recruiting GPs, and yeah, I get it. Why would a bright young physician who's just spent 7 years at university, you know, who's looking for the first years of career necessarily want to come to Thurrock when they get first sight of Thurrock? We love it because we live here. They ain't got a clue. But I think what might attract them more is if we do a bit more joined up thinking, if we have a bit of sort of blue sky mentality and ask that question, what would attract a GP? And it may well be that using some of this 106 money could be better used to create facilities where we have specializations as well as general practice, which is attractive. And I know this was part of the premise of the integrated medical centre, certainly at Corringham at one bit. But I just think we've got to be adventurous. If we do what we've always done, we're going to get what we've always got. And that's led us down a disappointing road. Not through anybody's particular fault, it's just the way things have been. So I really do welcome what you said earlier on about being a little bit more adventurous and a little bit more cohesive. As I say, we've got the 3 organisations. I hope that you will look at Thurrock as a place of potential, as a place of opportunity, rather than just that bottom end bit of mucky old Essex that we don't really want to talk about, because we're better than that. And I look forward to you reporting back to us in future. This is a start. The GP crisis is, again, sadly, was brought to the attention of this committee by the media, not by people flagging up a problem. You know, and that in its own right is a bit of a condemnation. We should be seeing what the problems are. But as I say, thank you very much for coming. Thank you for answering the questions forthrightly. We've got a couple of topics just to finish up the meeting, but if you guys want to pack up and get on your way, rather than wait to the bitter end, that would be absolutely fine by me. So I'm going to take the opportunity, because we've done well time-wise. Thank you, all people in the meeting. Some of us have spent some time yesterday talking about the meeting that we're all probably going to be a part of tomorrow night, which is the draft budget savings proposals. And hopefully you've all taken a great deal of time to look at what we'll be discussing in a lot more detail tomorrow. And some people have already tabled questions that will be asked tomorrow. But as we've got the top brass here, both from both sides of the officer cohort and the senior leaders, if anybody's got any burning questions about what is a significant document, we've got 10 minutes we can afford. I mean, this is, at face value, quite a terrifying document. I mean, adult social care, let's lop 8 million quid off. I wouldn't have Rob's job for all the tea in China. And a lot of the savings that are planned are down to efficiencies, and efficiencies are very easy to talk about and very difficult to deliver. As we've got these guys in front of us, and we may not have the opportunity because of time tomorrow evening, if any member of this committee's got anything they would particularly like to ask in advance, speak now or hold your peace till tomorrow. If not, we'll move on to the work programme. There you go. No, the door is there, it was open, and no doubt we'll be here till whatever, hopefully not till 1 o'clock last year, tomorrow night. So with that, we'll move on to the work programme. There's been a couple of things that I've made reference to that we'll bring back to the committee. I know that Claire is absolutely brilliant, so she'll have written all them down. Claire, do you want to take us through the work programme?
Thank you, Chair. So for the December meeting, there's been a request to remove the CQC inspection of adult social care report because I believe that inspection's not happened yet. So, Rob, was there anything that you wanted to further explain on that one, or?
Yeah, thank you, Claire. So possibly if I could just, I'm asking really for a little bit more time. So I think that probably it was put on the forward plan earlier this year at a time when Essex County Council got notification of their Care Quality Commission inspection, which was in May. And the original intention of the Care Quality Commission was they would kind of generally group inspections together on patches. And so I guess what happened was the thinking was, as they'd been called for inspection, the likelihood was that Southend and Thurrock would follow fairly closely afterwards. just so you know, Essex got the announcement for the inspection in May. They're coming on site in early December. So it's taking 5 to 6 months to move from notification through to actually coming on site at the moment. Now then, in that period of time, we have not been notified, we've not been called for inspection, so we've not had notice yet. There was a tranche called yesterday, for inspection. We are not in that tranche, and so we know we're not in the sites at the moment. If we do get the call, it is likely to be 5 to 6 months before we do get the actual inspection. I've been here 5 weeks, and I spent my first 5 weeks undertaking quite a lot of work reviewing the self-assessment that we are preparing for to make sure that we are ready for inspection. And we're wanting to engage with colleagues across the council and our sector partners as well in that preparation. Indeed, this afternoon I had what was called sector-led improvement meeting with somebody to come in and discuss our self-assessment with us. So I'm still actively working on the self-assessment at the moment, and really there's no risk of any inspection coming on site here really until early summer, late spring, early summer, even if they were to call the inspection now. So on the basis we're still doing more work in the preparation of our self-assessment and the quality of what we have to present, I'm asking if we can have a bit more time before we bring that to Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you, Rob. So that leaves us with, for the December meeting, we have the Q2 forecast revenue and capital outturn report, which will provide that bit more detail with regards to adult social care and children's services spend. Then as we go into January, we have the Childhood Obesity Task and Finish Group final report, which will be presented by Councillor Rigby as the chair. And then we have 2 children's services reports, the social care data reporting and childcare sufficiency assessment, as these are statutory duties, which then takes us on to the final meeting in March, which has the 2 cabinet member portfolio reports, the Better Care Together delivery plan from the other meeting, and then we have the Q3 revenue and capital report. We will have some items that will probably come to a briefing note, such as the update from Nikki Abbott from the MSC Foundation Trust with regard to the children and young people referral to treatment, because we're sort of very pressed for time by the end of the municipal year. And that's it from me, Chair.
Yeah, I think something, I mean, I was just looking, do we look at whether we can move forward either of the 2 children's social care, childcare sufficiency, and moving forward. The likelihood is going to be that something else will crop up between now and then. It's the 17th of December meeting anyway. I would wish to be onerous on officers or members, because we will almost be in the Christmas spirit by then. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just raise, please, about Youth Cabinet? Because when we used to meet as Children's Services, Youth Cabinet was a standing item, and they used to come every time and deliver a report and contribute to the overview and scrutiny. So I was just wondering whether they could be added back on again. Thank you.
That is an absolutely excellent. Well done. Really, because I think I've spoken a couple of times, for example, not just about Youth Cabinet, about young people who are doing such a good job, and we know Voices. But yes, I certainly think it would be appropriate to do that, Claire, if you could put an invitation out to them to come, and certainly it would be nice to see them before Christmas anyway, and say thank you for everything that they do. So thanks, Vicky, for bringing that up. That's really, really good. So I suggest we leave it there. I suspect there will be items that come out of tomorrow night that may raise concern or whatever that we may wish to discuss. So I think we're in a pretty good state going into the final month of the year. Thank you once again to everybody. I really do think that this is a decent committee. And I'll tell you what, I don't know whether our co-opting members have anything they want to bring to the party this evening. Jane, you sat there, and any concerns that you think we should be addressing?
No concerns, but just some work that Thurrock Coalition is currently undertaking. So the Thurrock Disability Partnership Board reconvened in July, and on the back of that, autism was brought up as a major topic. So we are currently looking at the strategy and engaging with many people in the community. So we will continue to update you on that.
Lovely, thank you very much. Right, well, I think that, unless anybody's got anything that they wish to bring to the party, I'm going to get a gold star here from services. So at 8:54 and 36 seconds, I'll declare the meeting closed. Thank you, everybody.